Greetings and salutations. Welcome to a midweek madness video. This is a video about audio and a video about Linux all at the same time because we're going to be taking a look at Puddle Tag, which is a wonderful tag editor for MP3 files and other music formats in Linux, and it works quite well. This video is by request. Somebody saw a video I posted last week about installing Linux Mint Debian Edition 7 as my main operating system, and in that video I showed you some of the audio software that I use, and I'm going to show some of that today as well, but mainly we're going to be focusing on creating tags, although I am going to talk a little bit about ripping audio from CDs, and I'll also show you a nifty little program called MP3 Gain at the end, which I have a long history with, and the story might be interesting to some of you guys, so I'll tell it at the end of this video. But let's start with a CD ripper, because most of the time when you are generating an MP3 library, you're going to be pulling it from a collection of CDs, and you'll need some sort of software to take the audio from a CD and put it into a file, and so you will need a ripper. I use Sound Juicer these days. I find it to be a very robust, simple program that gets the job done and does it very well. As a matter of fact, I have used this particular piece of software to create the music library for the radio station where I worked, WZBB. All of my personal country music CDs I ripped and created FLAC files, which I then imported into their automation system, and the quality was impeccable. There are some rough edges with this little piece of software, and we'll talk about those as we come across them. But I can recommend it if you're looking for something simple and robust, for sure. So how this works is you start the software, you put a music CD into the tray of your CD, DVD thing, your drive, that thing in your computer that eats CDs, spits them back out. Some people still have those. I do, because I do a lot of work with CDs, because this is kind of a hobby of mine. I have a huge CD collection, and I'm constantly digitizing things and playing with digital music on the computer as well. By the way, it's a pet peeve, and it's just kind of off the subject. When you take audio from the data stream on a CD and you put it into a file, that's known as a rip, because you are ripping that data from that data stream and putting it in a file. If you are making a recording off of a record or a tape or some other analog source, that is not a rip, that is a dub. You are dubbing that audio. I see that all the time. People will go, "Hey man, here's a vinyl rip. I got it off my record." No, you can't rip anything from a record. You dub. Just wanted to use this opportunity to point that out. Okay, so we put the disc in, and then it goes and it phones some sort of database somewhere that has a whole bunch of information about audio CDs, and it tries to find it, and if it figures out what it is, it'll pull all of this information in. Sound Juicer uses Music Brains. Unfortunately, there are a lot of programs that are still in the repos for Debian and other Linux distributions like Ubuntu that use the old CDDB database, which has been defunct for a long time now. And I had to switch over to Sound Juicer because of this. So CDDB was bought by Gracenote, and then Gracenote went away, and then the original free version, freedb.org, also went down. Apparently, GNUdb.org is still up, and MusicBrainz works, so there are alternatives. So if you run into where it's looking for CDDB to do things, unfortunately that software is not going to work. But this uses MusicBrainz, and MusicBrainz is pretty good. It recognizes about 90% of the discs that I put in. So once you get the information, you can see that we're getting things like the track artist, the title, and it has the album, of course, which is in this case big hits of the big 80s. I picked a compilation album. And so the first thing that you'd want to do is, before you start messing around with editing any of this, is you want to go over here and choose a naming convention. This would really be the first step in getting started with this. And how you do this depends on how you want to set up your library. There's a couple of ways of thinking about it. One is to have every CD that you put in, like every album, go into its own directory, and then you choose the songs that you want to have from that CD, and then they go into that directory. So if you would open up your music folder, you would find a whole bunch of directories in there with a bunch of albums. Now, if you want to do it that way, that's fine. I don't. When I started out doing this, I really wasn't into doing albums. I was into doing title and artist. I don't care. Just give me the artist and the title and give me a logical way to sort all this stuff. So artist title is what I have chosen. And I do not put them in individual directories for each CD. But you can come down here and check your naming convention. So if you have a directory with the artist name and the album name, then you might want to have your song be the number, track artist, and track title, which makes perfect sense. And then as long as you understand what your naming convention is, we can use that to extract information from it and generate tags on files that either do not have tags or the tags are messed up. We'll show you that coming up here when we get into Puddle Tag proper. I probably should have this on where it says strip special characters, and what that does is if anything is in the title that you can't put in a file name, for instance, in Linux, it will just replace it with a space. Now, back to naming convention for just a second. You will notice that the track artist and track title, okay, is separated by a space, a hyphen, and a space. You don't necessarily have to do that like here, but really you need to have that separation. If you don't, it's going to be hard to do mass tagging later, so let's make sure that that's on. I just happened to look down and noticed that I had clicked that option. So I have this set up to just go ahead and put the audio directly into an MP3. But if you are going to use Sound Juicer, I would advise against that because I do not like their preset, how they make MP3s, and it doesn't sound very good, honestly. They're using some sort of variable setup, and I don't like variable bitrate MP3s at all. My MP3s are either 192 or 256 constant bitrate. I switched to 256 many years ago when I went from using a program called Audio Grabber to Linux-based rippers and things that create MP3s like Audacity, because you don't have the finite control that I had in that program. And like, for instance, if you choose stereo, they're usually choosing what's called joint stereo these days. I'm not a huge fan of that, but at 256 kilobits per second constant bitrate, it really doesn't matter. So what I usually do with this program is I will create FLAC files which are lossless, and then I will use Sound Converter to turn them into MP3s with the settings that I want, which is another cool program that's available. But for this video today, we'll go ahead and create some MP3s because we're not going to be listening to that. And I have that going into my work folder. I would suggest that you do that. Don't put it directly in your music folder, especially if you want to go back and edit things, because once you get a lot of things in your music folder, that becomes difficult to do. So when you're looking through your tag info here, here is your title, here's your artist. And by the way, you're hearing my little dog in the background. It's very early on a Sunday morning, and she seems to be up and around. So that is her little toenails clicking on the floor, and you might hear other little dog noises as this goes on. All right, so let's look here at the J. Giles Band Centerfold Track 2. We want to get rid of the "the." All right, you don't want a whole bunch of files that are in your music folder that start with "the," because then it makes it difficult to find things. For instance, if you have a bunch of Eagles tunes in there under "the Eagles," then you're going to have to look in the "the" and the "Eagles," and it gets confusing. So I always just go ahead and fix that. like the person who typed all this stuff in has done it that way. Let's see what else we have here. We had the power station. We had the Eagles. Here are the motels. Let's get rid of that. This is one of my favorite 80s compilation CDs ever because two of my favorite songs of all time are on this disc. One would be Naked Eyes, Promises, Promises. Absolutely love that song. And the other one is Only the Lonely by the Motels. Which, by the way, this also has the best sounding versions of those songs that I've heard digitally. I have the 45s. I did a video nobody watched where I went through my entire 45 collection and showed a whole bunch of picture sleeves 45s. And Naked Eyes is one that I have the American picture sleeve and the British release too. So I'm going to unselect all of these files like so. And then we're going to pick a few that we can play with. So let's do Centerfold by the Dagals Band. Hold on, I want to unselect. Select none. There we go. So we're going to do, let's do this one. We'll do Robbie Neville here. Let's see what else. Naked Eyes, because I like it. Do the Motels as well. Let's see. Why not? And Don't Shed a Tear by Paul Carrick. That is a great tune. Get It On, Bang a Gong. And we'll do Election Day here as the last tune. So let's go ahead and rip these, and that will give us some files to work with. Now, this ripper is not fast, which is good. It needs to take its time. This particular piece of software is very good about minimizing errors and not putting clicks and pops and jumps in the music, even from CDs that are slightly damaged, which is nice. Like I said, I used it to create an entire music library for a radio station, and I was very impressed with the performance. So we're going to go ahead and let this rip. I'll pause the video and come back when it's just about done. Okay, looks like we're just about done ripping the tunes that we wanted from this CD. And once we get them all ripped, we'll jump over to Puddle Tag and load them up and start playing around with the tag information and see what we can do with it. And it ejected the disk, so it's quite done. It clears the screen, and we're ready for the next thing. Sometimes with Sound Juicer, by the way, before we leave it, I will say this. You put a disk in, and it won't find it for some reason. And if you run across that, take the disk out, wait 5-10 seconds, put it back in, and let it research it. If it doesn't find it, then it probably won't. But every now and again, when it's trying to get to the database, it gets confused. So what we have now is a whole directory full of files to play with in MP3 format. So if we open up a file manager, you can see them here. And so here are our MP3 files. This is the video we're recording right now, so we don't want to mess around with that file, but that's okay because Puddle Tag doesn't see MKV files, so it doesn't mess with them. So we'll be okay. So now that we have our directory full of stuff, we'll have to load it in. So go and click on the folder there, and then I'm going to click my home directory and go to work, and we'll choose, and there are all the files with all of the tag information that we have created. So what can we do with it here? Well, we can certainly edit it manually if we want to, but one of the very cool things about working with this particular piece of software is the fact that I think that has created it's put underscores through there. How did I do that? Wait a minute. That's interesting. Hold on. Why are there underscores? Let's go to Preferences. Strip Special Characters. Did you see that? It put underscores in there. I knew there was a reason I had that turned off. That's all right. We can fix that. That's cool. I'm glad that did that. I'm actually very glad that did that. That's a very old way of doing MP3s. Very cool indeed. So let's say that we want to fix that. Well, with Puddle Tag, we can generate file names from tags. So let's say that you have a bunch of files and all the tags are okay, but the file names are all over the place. You've copied them from different places, didn't know what you were doing when you were putting the library together. No big deal. All you have to do is to run it through Puddle Tag, and then what we can do is choose the format or the naming convention for our file name right here. So we have several to choose from. We can do just artist and title, which is what I always do, but we can do, like, let's do this. Let's do the number, and this will be the artist, the track number, and then it will be the title. So let's see what we get when we do that. So we come over here to convert, and we go tag to file, and we just did one because I need to highlight all of these. So let me go ahead and re-highlight. I used Control and A to highlight everybody. Tag to file, and let's go check our file names. And now we have the files done that way. So it's Naked Eyes 6 Promises, Promises, Promises. And then I guess you could just create a directory with the album name. Various. We would put those under various artists, I would assume, if you wanted to do it this way. So that works out well. One of the things to keep in mind is if you want to have album art, you're going to have the album in the tag because, for instance, the program Rhythm Box, which is very popular with, there we go, GTK desktops like GNOME and Cinnamon. This is pretty much the default. You see, I have the album art turned off. I don't even have it look for it, and the reason why is because it won't find it anyway, because I don't usually put albums in my tags. So the way I do it is I just have artist and title in a tag. I don't have anything else, and there's a reason for that. It's like the rest of this information I don't really need. And when I first started doing this, I didn't really care about albums. And if you stop and think about it, unless you're really like an album freak, in your digital music collection, you're probably going to be going after songs anyway. And so I wanted to do everything by song. Like in radio stations, if you create a music library back in the days when we were putting them on tapes, cartridges, then we didn't group them by album. We didn't care. We just said, here you go. And if you happen to remember that this song was from this album, you might announce it on the air. So I wasn't worried about that. And the other thing is that you'll notice that all of these songs are from the 80s, but yet the year says 1997, because when the tag is created, it's usually the year for the disc that they punch in. So that sounds about right for the big hits of the 80s CD that came out about 1997, because I remember getting it about that time. But that doesn't really apply to these tunes, does it? So what you would have to do is go through and do that manually. So I don't even bother with any of this stuff. I don't care about the track and all that other stuff. What I do is I will just do artist and title. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to rename these files artist and title, like so. And I'm going to do that by Control A, and then we'll hit convert. And this time we're going to do tag to file again. And we will check that out in the folder, and that looks right. And you've noticed we've lost our underscores and stuff like that, so that's pretty cool. Okay. So what I will do is I will usually generate the files and then make sure that the titles and artists are correct. And then I will come here and I will grab tag tools and I will remove all the ID3 tags. So that's gone now. So that gets rid of all that information. And now, if I F5, that will refresh that. Now we're going to do file to tag. And now we have created artist and title from the file name. Now, if your file names have more information in them, like the number, for instance, we could have chosen that particular convention, and it would then put that in the tag. So if you have files like that, and if you want that information in there, that would be the way to do that. This program does offer a way to work with album art, but I don't know how it works, and it's not something that I would fool with. However, if you go here and you go to Help, and you go to online documentation, you will get this. So this is actually we're a bit into it. I clicked on the first tutorial, but there's an introductory page, and this is actually very well done, and it shows you more things that you can do, like if you want to remove numbers from file names and all kinds of crazy stuff, then yeah, that would be nice to be able to do in some situations, and it shows you how to do it. So you can check that out if you want to learn more about working with Puddle Tag. There is one thing that I will show you in the preferences here. So we'll go over here and we'll go to Edit and the Preferences right there, and I'll come down to Tag. It says ID3 options here, and first of all, you want to write the latest version of the tag that it can support, which is in this case is 2.4, and then we will remove ID3 version 1 tags. Now, if you have a bunch of really old files hanging around, you may have some V1 tags in there. V1 tags were way more limited than version 2. The V1 tags had a very strict limit to how many characters could be in the fields and that sort of thing. V2 is much more flexible, so I just remove them and get rid of them. But it is possible to have a file with both a V1 and a V2 file on it, and the information in each one of those tags can be different, and you don't know that, and depending on what players you play it on, you might see that, and then that'll confuse the hell out of you. That happened to me one time. That's how I found out about version 1 tags when I was starting to fool around with this about 20 years ago. I was like, okay, we need to get rid of those version 1 tags. We don't need them around. So this program will automatically do that for you. So that's really all I've got about Puddle Tag itself, because it does those two main things. It will create a tag from a file and a file name from a tag, and that's really all I need it to do, and it will do it in mass. Like, for instance, let's go ahead and open up a different... I'm going to show you how quickly this will do this. So if I go here, and we're going to open up the music folder, which has... at this point, like 7,000 files in it. Let's see how long it takes for it to load that. So we're loading 7,000 tags in the background, and there they are. And as I have said, I don't really fool around with using anything but title and artist in a tag. So that is pretty much everything you need to know about Puddle Tag. Before we close the video, I want to show you one more little interesting piece of software that you might find very useful, especially if you have a collection of MP3 files. Now, this only works for MP3 files. This isn't going to work with MP4 or FLAC or OGG or anything else. This is for MP3 files only. And it's a program called MP3 Gain, which I have actually fought to keep in the repositories for Ubuntu and Debian Linux. They dropped this thing about 10 years ago, and I went on a campaign on YouTube here screaming and yelling how they should put it back. And fortunately, I got the ear of Martin Wimpress, who was maintaining this piece of software at that time. He made a PPA available so you could get it in Ubuntu. And of course, I downloaded it from him, and I also installed the PPA. But I think between me and Wimpy making a whole lot of noise, the maintainers at Debian and Ubuntu ended up putting it back. So thank you. We appreciate it. And what this little piece of software does is it goes through your MP3s and it listens to them. It actually figures out how loud the sound is in the MP3, and then it will reset the playback volume of the MP3. It doesn't change the original quality. We're not re-encoding anything. We're just changing the volume. It goes through, and on each frame in an MP3, it will set a volume so that everything that you play back will be at an average volume. It uses RMS and not peak. So that is an average, like what your ears hear, what you see on a VU meter. And the average is about -6 dB, which is about right, because if you have a VU meter and you're trying to drive a digital source with it, like you're recording from a analog console with a VU meter on it, you're going into a computer or a digital tape machine or something like that, you usually set 0 VU on the board to be about -6 peak on the digital device, and it works out. So this is exactly what this thing does. And it saves that information in each frame of the MP3. Now, if you want to, you can put it back to maximum loudness later. You can reverse this process, but you probably will not have to do that ever. There used to be a lovely piece of software for Windows called MP3 Direct Cut that also was able to access this information in MP3 files, and that would let you do really nifty things like reset the volume manually on an MP3 or put fades in, and you could also cut things. You could cut the middle out of a file and edit things and put it back together, and it would not actually have to re-encode the MP3. It would be working with the MP3 data directly. MP3 is a system that was originally designed for satellite audio and digital streaming over the internet. And so it's supposed to be this continuous stream. So all of the information about the audio is contained in each frame, so you can join it in progress. And so what these little pieces of software does, they actually access that. So how do we make MP3 gain do what we want it to do? Well, we're going to open up a terminal, and I'm going to click here and open in a terminal. And we're going to fire off MP3 gain. I should just figure that out. Yep. And we're going to use the R option, which means that we are going to average the loudness of each file to a reference. There are two ways to do this. One would be where each file is averaged to that -6 reference or -89 dB total loudness. I can't remember what that's called. Is that a TIFF, total loudness? Whatever it is. Anyway, it's -89 that we're going after. And we'll do each file that way. There's another way to do this, which would be an album gain setting, where you take a group of files and you feed it to it, and then it will treat that as one big long file, like it's an entire CD. So if a producer wants something to be low on purpose on a disc, it will stay low, but then if you average that out within a bunch of other files, it's pretty much in the same neighborhood. So we basically average out the entire CD. We're not going to be bothering with that. I never bother with that because I don't keep full CDs worth of stuff. The next option would be the K option. And what that does is it tries to figure out if it's turning it up so loud that it's going to generate clipping on playback. And in that case, it won't do that. It'll just sort of set the maximum loudness and forget it. So it'll turn it up as loud as it could possibly get it without clipping. So we're going to put those two things in, and then we're going to tell it we want to find anything with a 3 on the end in this directory. And then it should go on and do it. So let's see what it does. So as you can see, it depends on the song, whether, like here, it's -3 on Arcadia and the J. Gals Band, but to Only the Lonely, we put in -1, -2 to Paul Carrick. And, of course, if you have more modern CDs where they're participating in the loudness war, you'll see this thing turn it down by as much as 7 dB. And, of course, the nice thing is that if you put your player on shuffle, everything sounds the same. That's the whole point here, is that everything is nicely averaged out. We did not take any quality away from the files doing that. We did not re-encode them. We simply set the playback gain in each frame of audio in the file. That's all we did to make that happen. Very cool program, and one that I couldn't live without. I mean, if I had to, I would if it ever goes away, I will have to go get the source code and I will compile it myself, because I already have about 30,000 songs that are encoded this way. So anything that would be added or edited in the future is going to have that as well. So check it out, MP3 gain. And back in the day, for Windows and Linux, there used to be a lovely MP3 gain GUI interface, which has dropped by the wayside. They don't maintain that anymore, but you really don't need it if you understand how it works. You can just run it on a whole directory worth of files, and then you're ready to go. So I hope this video was useful to you. And it's just an introduction. This is a subject that is very deep, and there's a lot to this. And like I said, I've been doing this for 20 years. And don't be afraid to fool around with it. Just grab a directory full of files and maybe copy them somewhere else. Put them in a temporary directory and just play with it. See what it'll do before you turn it loose on your main music library. You might want to just load it up and see what you get. And you could do some manual editing as you go through to try and clean things up a little bit. My tactic usually is to go ahead and rename everything with artist and title, just as I showed you, and then go back and delete all the tags out of it, and then go back the other direction, and I will create an MP3 tag with artist and title. But that is truly the simplest way of doing this. So thank you for watching. I'm looking forward to your comments and suggestions. We'll do it again soon.